Follow Tiffanie Lanelle on social media at Tiff Lanelle on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.
Voting down the ballot does not mean voting one party down the ballot. Voting down the ballot means that every single race that's on your ballot, whether it's in this election or any other election, midterm elections, all elections from local, state, and federal levels are all important races.
Welcome to This is America, this special report where we provide a deep analysis of pressing national issues. America. Today, we are delving into the harrow trend of school shootings in America, uncovering how they continue to disrupt our communities, ignite national debates on gun control and safety protocols, but most of all, ask what the hell?
Because what the hell?
Oh, sorry.
No, I just had to echo what you said. What the hell? Go ahead.
The thought, getting through it and just thinking about the basics and specifically why we have to have this conversation. It pains me to go back and look for conversations that I've had about this in the past. It's painful.
It is. And I'm Tiffanie Lanelle. It pains me. I hate having to go back when we have conversations like this, when we have conversations about police shootings, when we have I'm tired of us having the same conversation over and over. And we have been, you and I in particular, have been having this conversation over and over again. This
conversation this way, in various ways, but it's an unfortunate but necessary conversation that we've had to have multiple times.
Yeah, it is. So I know today we are going to focus on the school shooting that happened yesterday, but we're not just focusing specifically on the school shooting that happened yesterday in Georgia at Appalachia High School in Winder, Georgia. I've heard a couple of mispronunciations of the area. It's fine.
And it's important to clarify that.
It is
and I'm
important.
I'm going to tell you why it's important. People. I hope I didn't cut you off, but people get to the point where they get so comfortable with their norms, they don't care to learn about other places. And that's a whole nother conversation, different show. Part of the reason that you're able to other people is because you don't see them as people. And so it's important that you get, just like you get the location right, you get the name right. When you talk about someone, you reference someone. Once this broke, me growing up 20 miles away from this place and hearing people first saying Wind, Georgia, then saying Winder, and then hearing Appalachian, I'm like, oh, this is all wrong. And it's not intentional. So it's important to just say this is Winder, Georgia.
Right. Yes.
Barrow County.
Yes.
Appalachia High School.
Yes. All of that. We absolutely will have the conversation on othering people, but that is a different show.
And I know you know about the Appalachian Mountains, so you're going to have to get rid of that Negro urge to say what you know and to correct something that is already correct as is.
That part, yes.
That's
yes. All. And so for context, for anyone who does not live in Georgia, has never lived in Georgia, Winder is probably, with no traffic, 45 minutes, somewhere between
good 50 miles.
Probably about an hour. It's probably going to take you an hour from the city of Atlanta to get there with no traffic. I just want to put that.
So it'll never take you an hour ever.
It'll never take. It's going to take you more than that. So
it's saying something with no traffic, it's going to take you 2 hours to get
Georgia,
there.
It's going to take you 2 hours to get there at any given time of the day. So that's just for context of where Winder, Georgia is. As you mentioned, Alex, we grew up 20 miles away from this high school. I think it had just been opened around the same time, maybe a few years before our high school, where we actually met, was open.
Yeah, you could say it's fairly new, but there's another 500 high schools that are in Georgia since I left. So,
and we didn't graduate high school yesterday. So I'm not going to age us, but I am going to say
it's aged. We are nowhere near a high school. Okay.
We are nowhere near a high school. So yeah, but this high school opened within around the same time as ours did. So that was the only point. But we want to not just talk about the issue of the school shooting and school shootings overall. We want to talk about mass shootings. We want to talk about some of the comments and things that we've heard from the different press conferences that have occurred over the last 24 hours. But we're also going to dive into the Georgia policies, because if you have not heard, Governor Kemp has been talking about Governor Kemp and the sheriff in Winder in Barrow County have been talking about the different policies and things that have been implemented up until even last week when they installed a new system, a new alert system. And so we'll talk about that. And then we're going to talk a little bit about why we need common sense gun laws, but what that really means and what are some examples of it. We've talked about that on different shows at different times, of course, again, because we've been having this conversation. But
and for that reason,
things we'll talk about.
I'm going out of my way to say things in the ways I've never said them before, because that doesn't work. From my perspective, I've been doing this for long enough to be able to say, this is what we say. We want to talk about the strategy. I need to speak it in a language, in a dialect, and something that makes sense to the average person, because they don't understand. They hear reform and then it sounds like a talking point. They hear control. It sounds like a talking point.
Yes.
They hear these things that should be, but that have never been. It's one thing for us as we speak as people that are nowhere near high schools to say that I know a time that it wasn't like this. But when you say those things that sound like talking points to people that don't know anything different. Yeah.
And for some politicians, it is just a talking point. I mean, while we were prepping to do this show, we're not going to play any of it because I just can't. But we were watching tons of video of 45 and his conflicting statements, whether he was talking to the NRA or he was talking to another crowd from 6 months ago to 6 years ago, where he has said different things on what his gun policies are and what they are not, and how, I didn't do anything when it came to guns, and I let you keep your Second Amendment rights. That's not exactly true. While he was in office, there was a mass shooting, and his administration passed regulations on bump stocks, which makes an assault rifle style weapon even more dangerous, which an assault rifle style weapon is already dangerous. But before we get into all of those discussions, I want to first recap what actually happened in Georgia yesterday. So at approximately 10:28 a.m. yesterday, that was when the first notification started going out to law enforcement that there was a school shooting that was occurring at Appalachia High School. What happens is there is a new alert system that was put in place just last week due to a bill that was passed last year in our Georgia legislature, House Bill 147, which is our Safe Schools Act. We'll get into that a little bit later. But essentially, one of the measures was that every classroom needed a button that a teacher could push. It sends a geolocation to local law enforcement, and then local law enforcement can descend onto the school location. So that is how the response was pretty quickly. I saw the first news alert at around 11 o'clock saying that there was some activity happening at the school. By about 11:25 or so, you can start to see helicopters, news choppers flying over the area as they're trying to get news anchors and camera crew out to the scene. Again, it takes a minute to get out to Winder from the city of Atlanta, but you can see the students exiting the school. They're exiting towards the football field. They're evacuating the campus, and then law enforcement eventually begins to rush inside of the school. They apprehend the suspect. We'll use legal terminology for, argument's sake. They apprehend the suspect.
The killer.
I say we're going to use the legal jargon.
I'm not.
Okay. I'm the Sonny of this show, even though I don't have a law degree. They apprehend the suspect, Colt Gray. His mugshot has been released. We are not going to show it because it's not about him. But
we
never do that. He is a 14-year-old who went in with an AR-15 and killed 4 people, 2 students.
It was not an AR-15. It was an AR style weapon. AR style weapon.
Yes.
I know the AR-15 fanatics are going to jump all over that.
Yeah,
Sorry, we're not talking about your baby.
We are not. Thank you. It's an AR style weapon. He killed 2 students and 2 teachers. One student was Mason. Both students were 14 years old, which is just so unfortunate. Mason Schermerhorn was a 14-year-old, and Christian Angulo was the second student that was killed. Richard Ricky Aspinwall was a math teacher who coached football at Appalachia. He also previously taught at Mountain View High School, which is a few minutes away from the area. And then Christina Aramy was the second teacher, who was also a math teacher, who was killed in this incident. At least 9 people were injured, but the school population is around 2,000. So that's not counting the mental and emotional damage, impacts, and trauma that have now been inflicted on this school and this community from one person who went in and had already threatened to conduct this mass shooting. He had already threatened to shoot up the school. He was interviewed by law enforcement.
He threatened to shoot up his previous school?
His middle school.
His middle school. He had moved. And I think what's interesting is, because I think that it's important for us to talk about him being on the radar.
Yes.
But the stipulation of this being a free country, what is the solution aside from we need to make some changes with our gun laws? Because his family had the rightful choice to move wherever they wanted to move, right? So to move out of the county that they moved in, where his initial incident was flagged because of his IP address, which it literally was reported to the FBI, which literally it went all the way through all the channels it was supposed to. It ended up in Jackson County, Georgia, which is on the other side of Atlanta,
right
near Macon. They get to his house, question his parents, question him. He denies it to the ends, says that it wasn't me.
Not only that, the father, and there's a lot of questions on, will the parents be charged? Will the father be held responsible, as with the similar case that just occurred? And we don't know. When law enforcement went last year, the suspect was 13 at the time. Again, he had been posting online threats that he was going to shoot up his current school, which was the middle school at the time. When law enforcement went to interview him and the family and his father said there are hunting rifles here, but he doesn't have access to them. So then how did he then gain access to this rifle a year later? How did he get access on the campus, walk around with this rifle on the campus? And then one of the questions that was asked during the press conference was how did he even have access to do this? Here's a clip from last night's press conference.
I was asking, why did the school resource officer not go looking for this kid and approach him? And why they sent a female faculty member to the algebra room he was in with my daughter, looking for him instead of the school resource officer, or why the school allowed this boy to come and go from the class all the time. He would go and sign up for the restroom pass, leave the class, and come back sometimes, and sometimes never come back. He has been wandering this school.
With all due respect, ma'am, I think your information is incorrect, and our investigation is going to lead to what we have, and we will be glad to answer your questions once that's done.
I guess victims are lying to me then.
Possibly. What can you tell?
So let's pause right there, because I didn't know you were going to play that clip, but I'm glad that you did. I feel multiple ways about that, so I want to know your thoughts. I appreciate the fact that a mother got to the press corps and was able to voice her concern at that time, though I do think that was extremely inappropriate.
I was very shocked that it happened. I was like, oh, wait, I don't think
it happened.
Heard that happen.
Because she started shouting just like that's what you do in the press pool. But she was so adamant. It was Governor Kemp that said, let's let her get her question in. So they ignored her. She probably did not have any press credentials, but he saw the concern, which is interesting for me to say. That's my assessment of him seeing the concern and wanting to have this concerned parent voice her, which everything she said could be true, but it also could not be true. So for you to interrupt a national press conference, which in these days, nothing's just national, it's global, with secondhand information, because maybe you got this information from your daughter, but that still makes it secondhand. So while they may investigate and find out and validate that same information and then make it true, this doesn't help the type of action that we want. Because my question to that, and we have a graphic about the number of shootings, mass shootings that have happened in the country over the last 6 years. We are more than halfway through this year. We're at 385, 656. And so every question that she asked could be asked in each of these scenarios.
Right.
How did this kid get access to the building? Someone said that he's been able to leave class and come when he wants to. We've gone through this. We went through Sandy Hook. We're still reeling over Uvalde.
Right. Which is just crazy.
And we're learning much more about school safety. It's much more, we are most of the time when someone comments on school, it's also based on their lived experience, which is fair. We've all had that lived experience. We only know from information based on what we get of what's changed, how things have changed. We do know that they have active shooter drills now, which is something that didn't exist, right? So, school safety is changing. It's trying to adapt, but if they're being pigeonholed by people that can pass laws that are constantly making this an uphill battle for them,
right?
At the same time, the numbers continue to grow and go uphill. When do we say stop? When do we press pause and say, okay, we can't move forward like this. We need to make a change?
No, I think that, I always talk about how much of a policy nerd and everything else that I am, but I think you are asking the right questions. One, starting with, I don't know how a parent got into the press area. Part of me is glad that she asked the question. The other part of me thinks that, this is for all intents and purposes, a smaller community. I was watching news coverage of it earlier today, and one of the parents said that when she spoke to her daughter who graduated from Appalachia last year, she said, how did this not happen in Gwinnett? Gwinnett is much bigger than Barrow County. Gwinnett is, considered now one of the Metro 5 counties or whatever, and it is a larger school system, but this is a small community. Kemp, when he was senator, this was his district. He covered this district. So he knows these people, for a good bit. So I can imagine how something like this would happen in that area. And also, you're right, it is secondhand information. What is not secondhand information, and what does seem pretty clear at this point, is there were warnings. There were warnings, and there are not enough policies in place, particularly in southern states, that are in place in order to protect when there are warning signs, when there are online threats, when there are when there are risks that are posed from someone. And so when you talk about yellow flag laws, red flag laws, common sense gun legislation, you also have to look at the fact that Georgia is one of the easiest open carry states in this nation.
By a choice made by the governor that sat there last night and said, we don't need to talk policy tonight.
Yes. He sat last year and signed an open carry bill, among other things, while also talking about our, and not just him, our legislature, we have a Republican trifecta in the state, which means that our governor, our lieutenant governor, all of our state leadership and our legislature are all Republican majority led. And so when you look at the politics of that, and when you look at the bills that they have passed, he's been talking about our Safe Schools Act. Yes, the Safe Schools Act was passed last year, but also that Safe Schools Act in part was to target gangs. It was to be an anti-gang legislative bill. And so, we can get into that too. But I think to your point and your question is, we don't have the policies in place. Governor Whitmer passed 3 red flag laws in the state of Michigan. Not a lot of states have those in place. And if you don't, for anyone who doesn't know, red flag laws are essentially laws that say if there is credible information that says someone poses a risk to society, to themselves, or to others, then they can be barred from having a firearm. Not enough states have this legislation in place. So if I go up to someone tomorrow and make a threat on their lives, sure, law enforcement could investigate. But at the end of the day, if they come in, they can't find any weapons, or they find weapons and they're locked up, and I have a license to carry, and, I have passed all of the very lax laws that exist here in Georgia, there's absolutely nothing they can do. They can't take my firearms. They cannot lock me up. They cannot detain me, even for a temporary amount of time. There's nothing they can do because we don't have any yellow or red flag laws in this state like you do in Michigan. And so,
well, like, I want to clarify something, but speak to that directly. 100%. I'm glad that the mother did advocate. And it can sound like I'm like, listen, there's a lot of things that people say in these moments that this is not the time, this is not the place. But in that moment, when you take that moment, and I believe it was a passionate, genuine moment, if they do the investigation and find something that's counter that, now we're sowing distrust that didn't have to be there. Right. So there's now people confused. Now people are like, well, they said, I heard. And that's the first thing out. You hear, the first thing that you hear is usually what you remember. And so, it's a dime in the bucket because the focus there is the lives that we lost, the heroes that gave their lives for children, literally, the law enforcement that did take action. But where we are bamboozled, and I think it's very important. I'm glad that you mentioned yellow flag and red flag laws. And then Governor Brian Kemp that signed an open carry. You don't need a license to carry a gun because you're fine with people doing what they do. That's the only reason you pass a law like that. We can talk numbers all day. We could talk numbers all day. The bamboozlement is that something can't be, because now the question, of course, Kamala has picked it up. Trump is talking about he's going to save it and he's going to save things. Kamala has and great that they have great sweeping legislation that they want to pass. To get some of that stuff done, there are a number of people that sit in elected positions that need to help those people push it through. You need to get angry with your government. You need to, with your local government, you need to get angry with the people that affect the areas that you live in. You're going to listen to this conversation, and Tiff and I live in different places. There are red flag laws that are in my state. There are gun laws in this state that are not like the laws anywhere else. This isn't a state that you can just come and open carry. You'll find yourself on Rikers Island. And that is just how it is, because there's just way too many people for you to come and think that you can have a gun permitless and think that you can just use that to defend yourself as if there are not other people that you could put at risk. That truth is not a false truth. It's the same truth in all of any metropolitan area, any city that has a dense population, any place that there's people. When you have schools in Georgia as they grow, I don't know the size of the student population at Appalachian High School, but I can tell you that 20 years ago, I had to transfer from an overpopulated school that had 5,000 kids to another school that was overpopulated by the time I graduated just a year later. So dense, tons of people at any given moment. Automatic rifle, automatic weapon. And you're numb to it, mostly because it could just be something that you're comfortable with, or it's something that you've never seen any action from. So that's the other reason that I feel like people are just numb or unresponsive to it. They respond when it happens, but it hurts the most when it hits either close to home or at home. And then the question becomes, why didn't anybody do anything?
Because sometimes
you got angry. You got angry with Joe Biden. You got angry with, you got some type of frustration or false anger towards a source that is not the problem.
That is not the problem. I'm so glad you said that. I have been saying to folks, I feel like I say it every election season. I feel like we both do. Every election season, people do not understand the role of the president. Well, if Biden needs to, and Trump needs to, and Trump did this, and when he was in office, I got a STEMI check, and when Biden was in office, and I'm like, the president is not responsible for that. In a press conference from Karine Jean-Pierre, she said, we are calling on Congress to do something about this. She said that because Congress can pass certain laws that then the president can sign.
I hate it. I really had to go here. And I feel like that this is going to lead us down a path that maybe brings us back to a place that we need to be. But I don't think people understand how the government works. And I'm saying
No. I know people don't know how the government works.
I'm saying I don't think people understand. Even when you say, that's why I have to find myself pushing back in any space that I'm speaking to people that are not my regulars. I have to say, I can't say elected official. I'm saying that man that you be seeing in that suit on the billboard that says mayor, he's the person you need to go address. Yes. She, while she's out smiling pictures and taking babies and showing up at your church, when it's time, she's the person that you need to be addressing.
Yes. I also, when we say vote down the ballot, I said vote down the ballot somewhere, and someone said, well, we can't say that, we're a 501c3. I'm like, voting down the ballot does not mean voting one party down the ballot. Voting down the ballot means that every single race that's on your ballot, whether it's in this election or any other election, midterm elections, all elections from local, state, and federal levels are all important races. You need to know who are your commissioners, who are your mayors, who are your state and your federal congresspersons, who is the president, because when you are voting for a president, you're not just voting for a president. Kamala Harris said the other day that she would and will appoint a Republican to her cabinet. She is saying that for various reasons. But I think the important thing there is when you elect a president, you are also electing a president who is responsible for many positions within the federal government. But you're right. Many people don't understand how our government works, whether it's local, state, or federal, because when you learn it in school, some of us are half paying attention, but then you also have where civic education has been taken out of many schools. So no, by the time you graduate, if you did learn about the three branches of government, you don't remember what all of them do and what all of them are responsible for.
The schools are now college prep. So the focus is not on the things that they're actually like, and again, another conversation for another day.
Because I can't.
But you're absolutely right. And the frustrating, like, again, up until they took out cursive and learning your full name and whatever else, is the same time they took out the very basic things. I'm just a bill. I'm just a bill.
And I'm only a bill. And someone watching this has no idea what we're talking about when we say those songs.
You were born in a time you also can't write your name in cursive.
And I just
know your full name. That. You may not.
I like you said, that's a different conversation. But the point being, you're right. People do not understand how the government works. And that is not us saying that, we're not saying that in a judgmental way. What we're saying is this is intentional, because if you don't understand how your government works, whether it's in your local, your state, or your federal government, then you also don't know how to advocate for yourself and your community. You also don't know who to go to talk to if there's a pothole that's been outside your neighborhood for 50 years and you just want somebody to fill the pothole. The president is not responsible for that. The president is not responsible for the fact that your power lines are above ground instead of being put below ground. Your president is not responsible for if you live in certain communities, red, black, brown, or disenfranchised, then your power goes out more often. That's an injustice. But the president is not responsible for that injustice. It's usually your public service commissioners, which is a whole different conversation, because like in the state of Georgia, we haven't had a public service commission race in a few years. We were supposed to have one in 2022. Lawsuits banned that from happening. And then our Georgia legislature just increased their terms. That's the kind of stuff that you need to know, so that when your power bill goes up 4 times within a year, you know who to blame. And it's not the president. It's your commissioners. It's your public service commissioners. But unless we have these conversations about these things and about gun laws in our different states, there are 21 states that have adopted an extreme risk law. Georgia is not one of them, unfortunately. So even when law enforcement went to this 14-year-old's house, he was 13 at the time last year, and it sounds like there were multiple, the fact that the online threat made it to the FBI, and the FBI had to go through the chain of custody, for lack of a better way to say it, but the chain of demand in order to get the appropriate local law enforcement to investigate, which is correct. And they still couldn't do anything about it because there's no extreme risk or red flag laws here. And so, part of the issue is... And
people don't know that, because I feel like if people knew that, why would you want to live somewhere like that?
Why would you want to live? Every time something happens here, I'm like, I'm just so tired of living in the Wild West.
Because that's not freedom.
That's not freedom. That is dangerous. And like I said, the Georgia bill that was passed last year, it's called the Safe Schools Act. The Safe Schools Act, though, is for... The language in it is how GEMA, the Georgia Emergency Management, and I don't remember what the A stands for, but that they got a little bit more power. It's a coordination effort between GEMA, the DJJ, which is the Department of Juvenile Justice. It's a coordinated effort in there, but it also is a coordinated effort with the Professional Standards Association. What that does is they essentially put language in this bill that said, hey, we want to make our schools safer. We recognize that times have changed. We want to do active shooter drills. We want to make sure that every school has a plan in place, right? Great. The problem with that bill, the problem that I had with the bill and the problem that a few others had with the bill was some of this anti-gang language that was in the bill. And so when you look at the language in the bill and it says, we want to make sure that if you are a teacher, you can take this optional anti-gang training program. But what they did is they looped it in with a school safety and anti-gang endorsement. And there are certain endorsements, there's a certain number of endorsements and things that are required for you to apply for and be considered for certain positions in Georgia schools here. So they looped it in, and there were multiple calls for amendments to this bill to take out the part that's on the screen that says, best practices for promoting and preserving safe schools, and for identifying and deterring youth gangs in such program. That specific language of the deterring youth gangs in such program is listed twice in the bill. And there were a couple of amendments that certain members of our legislature put forth in order to try and change this language, because they knew when you write something ambiguous like this, it gives teachers, staff, faculty the power to continue to perpetuate the cycle that is the school to prison pipeline, essentially. It gives them a little bit more leeway to be prejudiced and to cause some issues. So I just find it interesting that while I think that for the most part this bill has clearly proven effective for certain things, when you look at how this was voted on, I always look at the votes when you are looking at a bill. And this is where understanding how your government works is important. When you look at how the votes came on this bill, you see there are multiple votes in one day. Now you look at the yays versus the nays. What happened between vote 213 and 214 that made the vote go from 25 versus 30 nays to 52 yays to 3 nays? Nothing in the bill, no language was changed in the bill. The first 3 votes that you see on the screen, and for those who are listening to the podcast later, 210, 211, 212. Those first couple of votes are on posed amendments. Those posed amendments are to take that to deter youth gang language out. It did not pass. It's still in the bill that was signed by Governor Kemp last year. So when you say, oh, we want all Democrats, oh, we want all Republicans, oh, we want, be mindful that there are deals and negotiations and things happening in the room and in these spaces that we are not privy to. You could be privy to it. You can go to your Capitol. You can attend these committee sessions. You can listen to I listen to Sunny Dye and Crossover Day and everything every year for our Georgia legislature. These are our elected officials. These are the folks that we put into these offices. So I have every right to understand and hear the conversations. But when I look at this, I'm like, what happened between that second to last vote and the last vote where so many people, including Democrats, changed side? What was the negotiation that happened? And then you can start to understand, okay, who do I need to talk to? What do I need to do? How do I advocate?
Because them boys be scheming.
Them boys be scheming. Them boys on the block, them girls on the block too, be scheming. And this is the kind of stuff that I want us to understand. They passed this bill to be anti-gang. By and large, we have mass school shootings that are committed by, I'm going to just say it, young white males. That is by and large who's committing these school shootings. They got daddy's rifle out of the cabinet, or they got your mama's gun out of the cabinet or whatever, or they learned the lock code or whatever the case may be. There were warning signs by and large that have come out about quite a few of these school shootings that are happening. But again, we don't have enough laws in place. We don't have stringent enough background checks that are happening. And this is not to say,
but not in the places,
but not in the places where this is happening.
Yeah, it's not universal, and I think that's your problem. Right. Your problem is it's not universal, and it's not, you don't understand that you should vote because them boys be scheming. Like that's really why you should be voting. It's not your best interest at heart. Like that's why they bamboozle you into thinking that everybody has your best interest at heart. No, evil does exist. It does. It's out there. It's out there.
Yes.
It's actually prevalent. Secondly, it's also important for you to consider, and until you vocalize your mouth, your opinion is, yes, you vote. But those people got there because other people voted for them to get there eventually. Right. So if you don't like what you see, if you don't like where you are, it's on you to start to take some action. And it sounds difficult because of the way that it's presented to you. It sounds difficult because of the way that they package it. And then because everything's not the same everywhere.
Right.
My ballots aren't confusing. I live in a place that the ballot is very easy to understand on every level and printed in about 50 languages.
That doesn't happen here.
I know that.
There are
because
two
it's better if you don't
that have translation. DeKalb and Gwinnett, I think, are the only counties in the state that have translation readily available on our ballots. Now, you can take an interpreter with you, but you have to know that you have the right to do that. Our ballots are also not always easy to understand. I frequently have to explain to people what it means when I say, hey, should OCGA be amended? Like, yeah, that means our official code of Georgia. And they're like, what's that? So like, yeah, no, it's not the same everywhere. And I just, before we wrap this discussion, I just want to say this whole conversation is not to say that the Second Amendment shouldn't exist and that we want to take everybody's firearms. I do want to put in the context that the Second Amendment was written in the 1700s when they were trying to secure their independence from King George III. And so when you put that into context, you look at different decisions, Supreme Court decision that just happened with an 8-1 decision. The one was dissenting Justice Thomas. I almost called him something else. But you have to put the Second Amendment in the context of today's times, not the 1700s where they're talking about militia to protect their independence from the British government that they escaped and came over here to build this great experiment. Like, we need to...
Everybody does not have your best interest at heart.
Everybody does not. And not all people of whatever your selected party is have your best interest at heart. If you're Republican...
All black ain't black.
All black ain't black. All Republican ain't Republican. All Democrat ain't Democrat. Like, y'all do your own research. And enough with the thoughts and prayers. No more thoughts and prayers. Let's get some action behind that.
I'll finish with this because I think it's where we're going to be. America will never be able to say that she cared about her children because there will be, at least history will tell this story. It's not going to be written in a book. It's nothing specific. It's just what history will say, that America really didn't give a damn about her kids. She cared much more about her security, her national security, and much more about protecting people and their right to carry firearms for over 100 years than she ever did about kids. And that's
the moral of this conversation, and unfortunately the morals of a good portion of this country. So this is America. We will unfortunately probably continue to have this conversation, but we will have much more. I think we will,
and we need to have it. We need to have it more. And then we need to start to have this conversation. Find out what your state is actually doing. And then consider, do you still want to, do you stay there and fight that? Is it possible? Or do you go somewhere, especially if you have kids, do you go somewhere that is, they don't become, they have a chance. They have a fighting chance.
Yeah, that's the question of the day. Also, stay tuned so that we can continue to talk about there's a debate next Tuesday, so we definitely will have coverage of that.
We'll be there for that.
We'll be there. We'll cover it. We'll do all of that. So just stay tuned. Follow all of our things. You can follow me at Tiff Lanelle on most of my social media. Tiffanie Lanelle on TikTok. Alex, I'll let you give your information.
Go ahead. I don't know when I'm gonna see it, but go ahead. Alex Unmuted. It's a great place. I post there sporadically. I like email. If you can find an email address for me, I'll respond.
If you can find an email address for me is crazy. It's just crazy. It's been a pleasure. We will have so many more conversations. If you have questions, hit us up on any of our social media. Follow live updates from Noir Plus, and we will talk to you next time. This is America.
Have taken historic action to reduce gun violence. More must be done to keep our schools and communities safe. We continue to call on Congress to do something. Enough is enough. And I cannot say this enough, which is enough is enough. We cannot allow this to happen in our communities. We cannot allow this to happen in our schools.
Follow Tiffanie Lanelle on social media at Tiff Lanelle on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.